Well, everyone, and welcome back to Western Ag Network's Fencelines and Headlines. Thanks for joining us here on YouTube, Facebook, or on the audio portion on the Lanecast Ag podcast. Well, this week I found myself in Denver, Colorado, joining the National Red Angus Association of America for their annual meeting. A lot of great topics covered at this year's event, including the very popular Commercial Cattlemen Symposium that, well, I had the honor of emceeing for the second year in a row. We discussed a lot of top issues, from rebuilding the cattle herd after drought to nutrition, to one of the most popular topics being, what are carbon credits? So that's going to be one of the conversations we have here today, but we're also going to be joined by a plethora of industry leaders throughout today's fence lines and headlines. But as I mentioned, that carbon credit conversation was very popular, and we were able to catch up with Dr. Jordan Shockley. He's a professor there at the University of Kentucky, and for the past 2 years, his main focus of study has been what carbon credits really are. Dr. Shockley, thanks for joining us here today.
Absolutely.
And one of those questions that a lot of people may be asking is, we've heard about carbon credits, but what exactly are carbon credits, and how are they out on my operation? What are they? And let's just share more about that.
Absolutely. So technically, right, a carbon credit is actually 1 metric ton of what we call CO2 equivalent, right? So that can be generated on your ranch, your farm, row crop operations, what have you, in the agricultural space by adopting new practices. And so you can adopt maybe something like regenerative grazing practices and generate a carbon credit or numerous carbon credits on your operation, and then be able to cash in on these through some of the carbon programs that are out there. So in basic principles, it's a carbon credit, and it's 1 metric ton of CO2 equivalents that's generated by various practices that you can adopt in your farm.
So how do you go out and measure that 1 ton? That may be a question that so many of us, including myself, just need to understand a little more in trying to paint that picture of what the carbon market will look like.
Absolutely. So the extension answer to me is it depends, right? Every company goes about it differently. A lot of them right now use models and will put information on your farm, your practices, to basically estimate what would happen. Now, those models are only as accurate as the information being provided, and even in other instances, there are models that have been wrong and overestimated and overpaid. And so proceed with caution on how that's measured, and ask those questions if you're a producer. How will you be measuring this carbon that's sequestered in the soil and generating those carbon credits? Because each company does it completely differently.
So obviously we have heard about being able to use that for sustainable agriculture through utilizing carbon credits that way and being paid for that regenerative agricultural practice. But we've also heard about how companies are going out and buying those carbon credits to offset their carbon footprint. So those are two, situations that a producer would have to weigh. But I guess, what are the benefits? Obviously you're going to be making some money, but what is the benefit of that when you're looking at making more money as a producer? But what are some of the pros and cons that come along with that conversation?
Yeah. So in general, there's two kind of approaches being pursued in the carbon market space, right? You mentioned the first one, maybe going directly in the supply chain of beef, right? And working with a Tyson or some other company that has an internal based program, and those are called insets, right? You're working inside the supply chain to then sell your carbon credits. Then there's other programs out there that are actively recruiting farmers and ranchers to sign up, that are what we call the offset market. So they are working with farmers and ranchers, getting them to sign contracts, selling them in a third-party system, or putting them on a third-party verification system where someone maybe not in the agricultural space can come and buy those credits off of those verified platforms. So there's two types. Each one of them is different. I think one of the benefits with working with a company inside the supply chain is they understand production agriculture. They understand where their food comes from, how it's produced, and the limitations that can come with implementing some of these regenerative practices, because it's not all going to work, right? And so understanding that understanding what happens if you have a drought, right? And you can't sequester as much carbon as you thought you were going to be able to, and being flexible and understanding that situation, I think it is critical with keeping these carbon markets and carbon programs intact. Now, with that, those companies inside the supply chain, they're keeping it for their own internal uses. They're not turning around and selling them typically into other companies that aren't on the supply chain. So you kind of got this know where your food comes from standpoint, traceability within the beef supply chain.
Now, it just sounds a lot like mineral rights almost to me too. And I wouldn't do anything in mineral rights or buying land without mineral rights, without having a legal team in place, doing a lot of knowledge. So in your work in extension, I guess, what are you recommending for producers out there that are getting approached by companies that want to buy their carbon credits, or they're exploring some of these regenerative agricultural opportunities for marketing beef differently? I guess what is that advice you have for producers?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm an economist, right? So first it starts out with understanding your cost of production, right? Understand your baseline, and then what additional costs it's going to take to implement these practices that you're going to get paid for. Right now, a general claim, doesn't matter if you're a livestock producer or in the grain row crop space grades, these programs do not typically cover all of the direct costs of implementing the practices that you're signing up for. Okay, so how much, right? How much? Because it's going to come into your bottom line. Okay, and so is there opportunity to get a premium in some way, shape, or form and above to cover those costs? So that's number one. Number two, these contracts, they can be very confusing, and so hiring a legal specialist to review these contracts before you even sign. I mean, understanding that usually these payments are in dollars per metric ton of CO2 and not dollars per acre or dollars per head or dollar per hunter weight that we're used to dealing with. So understanding the components of that within the contract, it is critical. And read that fine print, because the devil is in the details of these carbon contracts. And so, yeah, it can get hairy, because each one of them is different. Each one of these carbon companies is completely different in what they're offering.
Well, and I've heard a lot of discussion with producers that have been implementing regenerative or sustainable agricultural practice for quite some time, that they're already doing some of the practices that these carbon markets are requiring, but they're not possibly getting credit.
That's absolutely
because it's already they're not implementing it under their terms. So that could be pretty prohibitive when we're looking at that, and frustrating along the way too.
It's called additionality, right? This is the key concept with these carbon markets. They mean the carbon programs want you to do something different, right? To sequester additional carbon. Well, if you've been doing those programs for years and years and years, for the most part, you're not eligible to enroll in those programs. So that's brought a lot of frustration. Again, I speak to a lot of farmers and ranchers across the U.S., and that's one of their number one concerns is, why am I getting penalized for doing the right things for years, and you're paying people that may have not been doing what they consider sustainable, smart practices. And so to me, that has to change. I mean, you have to incentivize those early adopters to continue to do what they've been doing, right? And we see evidence of that in the forest carbon market programs, right, that are out there, where they're paying landowners to not harvest, right? Well, why don't we do the same thing in the ag space? You know, in the row crop side of things, right? Not till. You've been doing no-till. Kentucky's the home of no-till production agriculture, right? Why don't you pay producers that have been doing it for 40, 50 years? It makes no sense to me. And I think that's one of the issues in moving these carbon programs forward, is you're alienating a large group of people.
Now, I understand that a lot of these carbon credits in the carbon market, they are different programs depending on who you work with. But is this in perpetuity? Is this a one-year contract? Or are you giving away those rights? Say, like we were talking about mineral rights. I guess how does that look? Because I know that's a question a lot of people are asking: is this a one-time deal? Is it a lifetime deal? I'm confused on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It depends. Depends on the company, right? Some of them are 1 year deals. Some of them range to 30. Some of them are up to 100-year contracts. So understanding the time commitment that you have, it all depends. And what one of the biggest questions also is not even the time commitment. What is regenerative agriculture? What is rotational grazing, regenerative grazing? Are they all the same? I don't know. You know, when one carbon company says, okay, we want you to implement rotational grazing, another carbon company says, I want you to implement, climate smart agriculture practices. What is that? And that's the issue in the livestock space right now, is it's very holistic and not very prescriptive about what exactly you have to do to satisfy those contracts.
And we all know there's always a new buzzword in agriculture. Sustainable agriculture was the big one for many years, and now regenerative agriculture is that buzzword. I guess that is a cause for concern. Is what is the definition going to be in 2 or 3 years? And should producers maybe hold back a little bit and watch how this actually develops, or are the guys that are adopting it now going to be more successful because of that and be able to stay in business and expand? I know you probably don't have an answer for that, but it's an interesting question maybe.
I'll say, majority of the producers I speak to, they are in a wait and see pattern, and how this shakes out, because there are conditions and things that are going on in the supply chain with companies that could shake things up quite a bit, and maybe eventually these third-party entities may not exist anymore. They may go bankrupt, and not all of these carbon companies are going to survive. So what happens if you enroll in the wrong one, right? And if you enroll in one program, you can't double dip in another one. And so I think a lot of producers, and I think rightfully so, because there's a lot of risk and the payment levels are not there yet. Because all of this is driven by corporate claims of wanting to be a greenhouse gas neutral by a certain time in the future, right? And those time frames are typically 2030, 2040, 2050, right? Well, why would they pay all this money now for a carbon credit when they've got time to figure this out themselves? And so I anticipate if these carbon markets are still around, that the prices will be higher. And so is there a price adjustment in those contracts for being an early adopter? And that's what you're seeing. So a lot of the studies, less than 0.5% of people are even enrolled in carbon contracts or even thinking about carbon contracts. So they're here. There's a lot of noise, a lot of confusion, but a lot of risk.
My last area of question, as you have studied this and talked about this, how much of an impact up to this point have consumer preferences had on the creation of these, especially in that regenerative beef end of things?
Absolutely. So it's driven by consumers too. That's the other part. So you've got the corporate claims and you've got consumers, and they want sustainable practices, right? We saw a presentation earlier this morning on that. However, there is no evidence that I've seen, and no research, that they're willing to pay more for that ribeye that's produced regeneratively, okay? And so as an economist, that's a big question. Okay, if they're not willing to pay more for that product, who along the beef supply chain bears the cost of those farmers implementing those practices?
My guess is the cow-calf producer, but
well, my Kentucky folks don't like to hear that, right? So,
well, again,
but you're right.
yeah. Very complex, and there's pros and cons with this. And obviously, your message is do your research.
Yep, absolutely.
Work with a legal team, and again, know what you're getting yourself into, because this is a brave new world.
It is.
If we want to describe it that way.
It is, absolutely.
Again, carbon credits, a very, very confusing subject matter, and we are just breaking the top of that iceberg in our discussions. We'll provide more information on Dr. Shockley's studies there in the links provided here in our stream. Don't go too far. We'll be back right after these messages from AgRisk Advisors.
Ready for a real PRF partner?
He was willing to track us for a year and provide that data back to us for a year. That's a guy making a pretty big investment.
At AgRisk Advisors, this isn't our first rodeo. We are one of the most experienced in pasture rangeland forage. Honesty, commitment, trust. Many companies use these words. At AgRisk Advisors, we earn them.
As we continue to have our conversations here on the road at the National Convention of the Red Angus Association of America, we've been saying it all week, but our coverage is brought to you by our friends at AgRisk Advisors, and we're finding ourselves taking over their booth for our conversation here from Denver today. We're actually joined by Colorado rancher Aaron Kravig. And Aaron, you're not only a rancher, but you are an AgRisk Advisor as well, but also you're a member of the board for the Red Angus Association of America. How's convention going here this year?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here, and it's going really well. I think we're excited to be back in Denver. Starting this year, we're actually going to be in Denver every 2 years for the convention, which is really exciting. We've got a great set of sponsors here today, obviously AgRisk Advisors. Great group of people. We had a great commercial cattleman symposium yesterday, a lot of good knowledge there, some excellent speakers. So
Now, being active in agriculture, but also being very active within risk management as well for producers, how important is it for ranchers out in the countryside to come to events like this, whether they're Red Angus producers or raise other types of cattle, but how important is it to come to these meetings on the local, state, and national level and just learn how they can advance their home operations?
I think it's really crucial for everybody to get out. Your operation might be different than my operation, and getting here, not only listening and taking advantage of the speakers that we have, the sessions that are going on, just the camaraderie amongst other ranchers, and trying to make different connections. Maybe you're trying a different feed program, right? But yeah, it's important.
Yep. So for you, how long has your family been in the Red Angus business?
Yeah, so I'm fifth generation on my family's place. We've been raising Red Angus cattle for about 45 years now. I've been selling bulls, having production sale, female sale, one in the fall, one in the spring. We've been doing that for about 12 years.
Now, I forgot to mention that you are a Colorado rancher as well. I guess what's it been like the last 2 to 3 years, just with weather and obviously higher cattle prices this year for cow-calf producers out there. But what's it been like out there within the environment?
Sure. The last couple of years have been tough, dry. This year, just complete opposite. We've had a record year this year. Typical moisture for us is around 12 inches. This year, I think we've had probably 38. Fantastic. I mean, the grass hits you mid-thigh, the ponds are full, cattle are fat. With that, I am nervous a little bit on breed back on those cattle. Anytime we have that much water and that much green grass, it just kind of all goes out the back end. We usually have a little bit better, or a little poor conception rates on there, and our calves are going to come off a little bit lighter. As you mentioned, though, the prices of cattle are just through the roof, so it's going to be pretty balances out, I guess.
Well, obviously, you mentioned 38 inches of rain. That's a lot of precip.
Yeah.
But, especially during times like this where, you are an AgRisk Advisor, you work with fellow producers with risk management tools, livestock risk protection, or in particular, pasture rangeland forage insurance. I guess somebody may be saying, well, why do I even need to consider looking at a PRF policy when we got a lot of rain this year? I guess, what is that conversation like?
Sure. Well, I'm as guilty as anybody in the producer world that we have pretty short-term memory. It's been great this year. Hard to think back to last year when the dust was blowing every single day. We don't want to remember those days, right? Programs like the PRF program, they're really, really good tools to have in your back pocket. they're a long-term program. It's not, I'm going to make it big this year. It's not a make or break program at all, but it is a nice tool for myself and other producers to have to help keep us in business. We might need to pick up an extra lease if it does get dry, right? Years like this, the calves might come off a little bit light. Hopefully, if we place that coverage correctly for you or for any producers, then we might get a little indemnity there to kind of make up for the weight on the calves.
So when is the enrollment deadline for PRF? That's coming up pretty fast.
It is, yeah. We're about to get real busy. Myself especially, between weaning calves and starting to get out and re-enroll people and enroll new customers as well. Deadline for the pasture range and forage program is December 1st, and that'll start your coverage for the calendar year on January 1.
Well, again, a lot of risk management tools provided by the team there at AgRisk Advisors, and I encourage everybody to go and check out at agriskadvisors.com. And also, Aaron, thanks for joining us here today, and thanks for your leadership on the national level with the Red Angus Association of America.
Absolutely, yeah, it's been my pleasure.
All right, friends, that, of course, is a great informational session here from the convention here in Denver. For more of our conversations that we've had, whether it's carbon credits, nutrition, and, of course, how to get through drought, follow us along on Facebook, YouTube, and westernagnetwork.com.
When it comes to the beef business, there's no room for gray area. The decisions being made in Washington affect the future of the beef industry, the livelihood of your fellow farmers and ranchers. Your National Cattlemen's Beef Association knows there's what benefits cattlemen and there's what doesn't. Visit ncba.org to learn more.
Well, as attendees at this year's Red Angus Convention made their way through the trade show or attended the Commercial Cattlemen Symposium, they learned more about programs available for commercial Red Angus producers and registered breeders alike, especially about third-party verification. We were able to catch up with IMI Global's Doug Stanton, who explained more about these programs that help advance producers' herds out in the countryside. Doug, I tell you what, you were one of those presenters at the Commercial Cattlemen Symposium. It was a full room. And I guess, what was it like just seeing all these producers that do have a little more optimistic mood with these prices being a little bit higher, but what was it like taking the stage and just addressing these producers here in Denver this week?
Oh, it's always a great opportunity. I enjoy doing it and be able to get in front of a group of people and be able to tell them our story and what we offer. And ways that we can help improve their bottom line by adding premiums to the great cattle they already produce. Everybody produces great cattle, and especially people that come to conventions like this are the more progressive people in the industry itself and Red Angus commercial and sea stock producers. So we like to so where we can get up versus one-on-one, which we do a lot of every day on the phone and in person and on operations. It's great to get in front of a large group of people and be able to spread that message in a larger, in a greater fashion.
Now, of course, we hear the term third-party verification a lot, and obviously IMI Global is a leader in that. What is third-party verification? Is it voluntary?
Yeah.
Is it mandatory? What is that for our producers? It may be question what that program looks like.
Sure. Yeah, third-party verification is totally voluntary. It is not. Now, I will say the only involvement of the government at all is that we have what is known as a USDA Process Verified Program, PVP, and that is oversight from AMS. And so they audit us, and then we audit operations, which works much better than them going out to the operations. That would make people, a little uneasy. And they don't have the capabilities and the manpower to do it. So we are considered a third-party verifier under their USDA PVP shield, but that is also with the AMS part of USDA, which is the voluntary part and not the regulatory part of USDA. So it is totally voluntary, and what we're doing, is just trying to provide additional value. And yes, there is the prices are great this year, and they're bringing back a lot of money, which is great for the cattle the great cattle they're producing. And we just trying to add some additional value to that. And, in Lane, we've been watching the premiums, the summer sales especially, And we're seeing about the same amount of premiums, in some cases more, but same amount of premiums that we have over the last couple of years, even though the base price is higher. Producers still want to participate in the program. They still want to, once they get involved, we see people continue to do it year after year. Becomes just a part of their everyday things they do on their operation. And, we're not doing anything when we come and do an audit. We're there to verify. We're not there to gotcha.
That's a scary word, audit.
Yes, it is. And in a lot of cases, I like to use the word evaluation or some other term because, we think of government when we think of that. And that is the term, but it is the one we use. And but we're just there for conformance. We're verifying conformance. That's all we're there to do. We're not there to look behind, in their back part of their shed and try to find something and gotcha. That's not what we're after. We're there for conformance. There's a lot of trust that is there. We're there one day a year, and so, but it's that's what we do, and we've been doing this since 2005. We were the first USDA process verified program in the U.S. that got approved for export to Japan when we lost that access because of BSE. And so we refined things over the years, and we continue to add programs because as things come up, and now sustainability is a big thing in the consumer's mind. Animal welfare was there 10, 15 years ago. That was a concern. But now it's evolved into a larger, platform where we understand that. We want that to continue. That is important to us, but we're also worried about the environment. We're worried about even the people working on the operation. How are they treated? Those kind of things. And at the ranch level, the family ranch level, that's really doesn't come into play much on that side of it. But in the larger, ranching operations, it's still something that we need to be conscious of at least. So we're going to continue to bring programs to our customers, and if we see there's going to be value, we're not doing things that we feel like is just something more work for them, more documentation, more paperwork. And for no value. If we don't have any value, we don't bring any value to the end of the day, then everything we're doing has no purpose.
Now, you mentioned value, and some of those conversations talked about a program for Red Angus producers or those running Red Angus cattle out in the countryside on the commercial. And what is that program, and what are those premiums looking like then?
Sure. The Red Angus has a PVP themselves with USDA. And it is for genetic and source and age verification. And with that they're verifying that animal that is being marketed under the FCCP program is at least 50% registered Red Angus in that animal itself. So they verify that by making sure that there are registered Red Angus bulls on the operation. That is one component of it, and then source and age verification. And today we aren't doing like we did when we first started with Japan. That was validating cattle under 20 months of age. It's for cattle under 30 months of age now. And so that's the program they offer. They have a tag that they utilize, visual tag, but they also they're moving now, evolving to EID because that's really what's needed in the industry. At the feed yard and packer level, that's really how traceability is being managed, is through EIDs. And so that's what they've always done. So they've never wanted to, or we've partnered with them for several years now, and we allow customers, Red Angus commercial producers, we encourage them to go through FCCP, get that Red Angus genetics and get the source and age done, and then they can come to us. And we make it very simple. We don't require they bring another tag. We accept that tag to come into the system. We only charge them $1 a head to do it. And then they can look at other programs that we offer, that being NHTC or our Verified Natural program, and now our new beef care program. So it allows them to continue to still work with the association and then also participate in additional programs. And I think anytime that you can bring another claim to a buyer, it reduces, not only they red heighted, they're also FCCP approved. Therefore, they're out of registered Red Angus sires. And so that brings more value in the marketplace because anytime you can provide that buyer with less unknowns, then he's going to feel more comfortable than maybe another group of cattle that are just red cattle, look red heighted on the screen in a video sale or something. And so that's where the value is coming from. And we're seeing premiums, it's hard to pull out individual premiums because everybody, there's a lot of bundling, and we encourage that. We have a lot of customers that do source and age. They may participate in the FCCP and then also NHTC natural and then the care program. And and then we see what those premiums look like. And it's like, okay, how do I pull out just one? And no, it's difficult. But we feel like anytime you can bring additional claims to the table like that, it's got USDA, behind it. So they're not just making that up. There is teeth in that, and it is third-party verified too. And so you're providing that. That's how you're bringing the value to the marketplace.
Well, for our friends that are listening or watching this conversation, how can they get in touch with one of the field reps with IMI to maybe explore some of these programs?
Yeah, probably. Probably calling our office is a place to start. We're in Castle Rock, Colorado, and is our office. But we have staff that are remote and some in the office. But and then we have auditors that are that actually come on site throughout the country. They're not all coming out of Colorado. We try to get auditors in areas where our customer base is, because the customer is paying for the travel, and we want to reduce that and combine trips and do as much as we can to keep those costs as reasonable as possible. So we have auditors throughout the country wherever our customer base is too.
Well, a lot of big topics discussed across Western Ag Network country, and especially here in Denver this week as the Red Angus Association held its national convention. A lot of big topics, but again, carbon credits as we started the show off with. And if you want to see more of these conversations or listen to them, make sure and check out the Western Ag Network Facebook and YouTube channels, along with the Lanecast Ag podcast for the audio versions. Again, thanks for joining us for this edition of Fencelines and Headlines here on the Western Ag Network. On behalf of the entire crew, I'm Lane Nordlund. We'll catch you next time.